All right, well, good morning, and thank you for joining our webinar, Understanding EVs, Real People Share Real-World Stories of Electrifying Their Ride. I'm Dory Larsen, the Senior Electric Transportation Program Manager at the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, or SACE. Over the next hour, we're going to hear from real EV drivers who will share their stories, insights, and tips on driving electric. A couple of technical items. When you registered for the webinar, we shared our EVs 101 fact sheet, and we're going to drop it into the chat for you now. So while you are listening to the webinar and thinking of questions, it may spur some new ones. So during the presentation, you can submit those questions by clicking on the question and answer box and typing your question. We have a few attendees on the webinar today, so if your question does not get answered, then please reach out to us following the webinar, and we will be happy to provide some contact information in the webinar follow-up email. And also following the webinar, we will be sending a link to the recording. So if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide for us, Reed. Great. Give me just a second. I want to make sure. There we go. I'm putting the chat, the link to that document in the chat. So if that could go out, that would be great. All right. So today's agenda follows a brief introduction to SACE and the clean energy generation movement, hearing about the clean energy generation in action and how you can get involved. And then we'll have our conversations with Sara Vinson, Madelyn Collins, Wesleigh Wright, and Tarique André Miller to finish out with some time for questions and answers. So the next slide. If you are new to the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, I wanted to take a moment to share who we are and what we do. SACE is a nonprofit organization that promotes responsible and equitable energy choices to ensure clean, safe, and healthy communities throughout the Southeast. And since 1985, we've been a leading voice for energy production in our region. And SACE is focused on transforming the way we produce and consume energy in the Southeast. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Chris Carnevale, our Climate Advocacy Director, to kick us off.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Carnevale, as Dory said, and I'm the Climate Advocacy Director at Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, or SACE, as we call it. This webinar is part of our series of clean energy generation webinars. And I know some of you have been on these before. For some of you, the concept of the clean energy generation might be new, so I'm just going to take a couple minutes to explain what the clean energy generation is all about. So it is an initiative that SACE launched last year, and it is a movement of people who are taking action to create a healthier, more secure, and stable environment starting now. Next slide, please. And why now? There's two dissonant themes that are happening that we're experiencing in the world right now. It is the best of times and the worst of times in 2024. On one hand, we see the worst of times in that climate disruption is at an all-time high. 2023, last year, it was the hottest year on record, and new records are already being set this year. We see unprecedented flooding, wildfires, and hurricanes, and other forms of extreme weather. And we're seeing that the roller coaster weather that we're seeing is we're experiencing Earth's climate being out of balance. And so that's the worst of times. But at the same time, we're also in the best of times. We've never been in a better position before to address the climate crisis. And even though, folks have known about the problem of climate pollution and the climate crisis for decades and decades, we've never before been in a better position to address it and to come together to take action to secure healthy and safe futures for ourselves and our communities. And so what I mean by that is never before have we had the types of affordable and plentiful clean energy technologies that are available right now. For example, electric vehicles, like we're going to talk about today, and energy efficiency and solar and renewable energy. There has never before uh, been such historic federal funding available to grow and expand clean energy deployment. With the recent action at the federal government in the last few years, with the Inflation Reduction Act, primarily, also the bipartisan infrastructure law and various rules and regulations that are being enacted. There has never before been the type of tailwind that we now have to push us into a clean energy future. We've also never before seen, such growth in public and private commitments, and also individual and community actions. Next slide, please. So the clean energy generation, in a nutshell, is, as I mentioned, it's a movement of people coming together to secure more healthy, sustainable futures. We call it the clean energy generation, but I do want to note that it is people of all ages and all abilities, regardless of if you're somebody who's, just like obsessed with clean energy and it's something you think about all the time. And maybe if you're a professional clean energy advocate or someone who is part of, a club or an environmental group or something like that. It's for folks like us, but it's also for people who maybe like don't know much about it and they're interested. Someone, if you're maybe concerned about the climate and that you're curious about what opportunities there are. You've heard of the Inflation Reduction Act, maybe, or the new tax credits are available and you want to learn more. This is the space for everybody to come together and to learn about what are the opportunities that are available now for advancing a clean energy future, whether that's within our own households by, for example, making our homes more energy efficient or putting solar on our roofs. Maybe we want to learn about opportunities to drive an electric vehicle. Or, maybe you're interested in meeting and networking with other people from around the region, or maybe from, your own state or own community, and you want to take some collective action. For example, going into the community and talking with your mayor or your city council people or your city manager to talk to them about what opportunities they're taking advantage of and what they know about the new federal tax credits that are available or other incentives that they can use to drive forward clean energy at the community level. Maybe you're interested in learning about some of the new programs that are coming out of the federal government for access to solar for low-income households, or opportunities for nonprofits and houses of worship to have more energy efficiency in solar. The clean energy generation is a space for us all to come together and to learn about those things and to help people figure out how they can fit into, being part of the solution. So we have monthly member calls, clean energy member calls, where we will talk about, current, news updates about what's happening with new opportunities for enacting clean energy and clean transportation, and also talk about ways that we can get more involved at our households and in our communities. The other thing is it's a good opportunity just to network with other folks from around the region. So we have monthly calls, and if you have not yet joined the clean energy generation initiative, we'll drop a link in the chat and you can sign up, and we'll make sure that you get our monthly newsletters and get invited to our monthly clean energy generation member calls. And I will pass it back over to you, Dory.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that and those insights. All right, so we're going to kick off our conversation with Sara Vinson. So Sara Vinson switched to an EV after a faulty oil change in 2019 and has never looked back. Driven by creating a healthier world for future generations, she co-founded the nonprofit Sustainable Newton in 2018 to engage her community in meaningful local climate action, and owns the Yellow Hen Farm, which provides fresh produce and eggs to her community year round. So welcome, Sara. Thank you for being with us. So I mentioned in the introduction that you had a botched oil change. Can you talk about that a little bit, and when and why you made the first switch to an EV, and then how difficult the search and buying process was for your first EV compared to your second EV?
Sure. Well, in 2019, I knew that someday I would own an EV, but I did not have a plan of action. I hadn't looked at any EVs. In August of that year, I took my beloved Mini Cooper in for a routine oil change, and the oil change was botched and the engine was actually totaled. And the last thing I said to the shop owner when I was leaving was like, my next car will be an EV and I will never need another oil change again. So I wanted to follow through with that. But at that time, you couldn't find EVs on car lots. So there was nothing to try. We hadn't done any research. So I actually considered a hybrid. But of course, that would have required continuing with oil changes. And I had made that commitment not to do oil changes. So we ended up going with a used Volkswagen e-Golf. It was a 2019. It had 5,000 miles on it, but it was a used vehicle. We bought that through Carvana. So we received it sight unseen. I had never even driven an EV. The car was delivered with just 18 miles of charge on it. We had not installed an EV charger, so we just plugged that car into the wall, and it charged up slowly but surely. And I had that car for 2 years. It had just a 150-mile range, but it was the perfect car to get me to my parents who live in Atlanta, to the airport if I needed to go, or to Athens where my son was in school. One drawback is that it had no fast charger capability. And my car has always been like our main family car. So if we were going to do traveling, we knew we needed probably to get something with a fast charger capability, because fast chargers were just starting to appear in 2020 and 2021. So in 2021, when the new Volkswagen ID4 came out, I was able to test drive that car at the dealer. And we ended up buying an ID4 Pro, and that car has a 260-mile range. It's compatible with fast chargers. And in fact, just this past weekend, I traveled to Memphis in that car to help my daughter with a move, and we were able to utilize the fast charging stations that have been installed along that route. So it's been a great car as well.
That's great. And it's fascinating to hear how quickly the evolution of the models and the range has come. So on the slide, the top right picture is the white Golf, and then the other car that you were mentioning is the top left. And there's a third picture in the slide that I wanted to ask you about. So your husband also then switched to an electric work truck, which is a Ford Lightning. So were you surprised by its performance? And can you talk about driving that? What are the benefits? Are there any drawbacks?
Sure. Well, in 2022, he was driving a Chevy Silverado and was paying $68 every other week to fill that vehicle. And at the end of 2022, he was able to take possession of a Ford Lightning XLT, which is just one up from the base model. So it truly is a work truck. But now he charges that truck at home once a week, and it costs less than $1 to charge it each week. And that's largely because of the Georgia Power Overnight Advantage plan, a time of use plan that makes electricity cheaper at night. So that's been one of the benefits. And I'll tell you, the Ford Lightning definitely lives up to its name because it has amazingly fast acceleration. It can go 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 4 seconds. The Volkswagen, my Volkswagen ID4 is not that fast, which suits me, but my husband really likes to be able to, get on the interstate and, move into the traffic quickly. It also has a handy frunk or a storage space under the hood of the car, and the frunk and the truck bed is stocked with outlets, which is great for tool charging that he may need to do. He's a general contractor. And we have also used those outlets to charge our household appliances during power outages. And in fact, at one time we were seriously considering, household batteries. We do have a small solar installation, but because of the Ford Lightning's capability, just to plug an extension cord in and plug our refrigerator in or a router, we're fine with just that. So it's been a great truck as well.
That's great. I don't think a lot of people realize the resilience piece that, an electric vehicle is basically a big battery that can also, some models like the Lightning are capable of pulling the electrons back and helping when you need them. So that's really, I'm glad that you brought that up, but I'm glad that you also highlighted the fuel savings that are associated with, not having to spend on gasoline for a F-150 traditional truck. That's great. So thinking again about the financial incentives you mentioned the time of use rate for the electricity, which is another way to save money driving electric. Can you speak to other financial incentives like the IRA tax credits that helped you as you were purchasing the 3 different vehicles, and maybe talk a little bit about how those tax credits have shifted? And then did they ease the buying process? And when you first began searching for incentives like that would work for you, were they easy to access?
Sure. Well, in 2019, when we bought the used VW e-Golf, there were no tax credits or rebates for used vehicles, as we're seeing just this year. And in 2021, there was a federal tax credit for new electric vehicles. So we were able to use that for the EW ID4, and that was before the Inflation Reduction Act. But the Inflation Reduction Act continued those tax credits, which we were able to take advantage of for the new Ford Lightning. And that tax credit is up to $7,500 for new vehicles and up to $4,000 now for used vehicles. Because we're both small business owners, we do use a tax preparer to do our taxes. And I was a little worried, would the tax preparer recognize this? Would they know what to do? But the tax preparers are educated. They are prepared to handle your purchase of an EV. So we were really happy with that. Today, I think the process would be even easier and more beneficial to the buyer because you have a choice of taking a tax credit or, with participating dealers, taking an upfront rebate. So that means the dealer gives you that money off the car, so your car loan would be less, and then they would take the tax credit. There are requirements. So there's income levels that have to be met, and with the Inflation Reduction Act, vehicle and battery assembly requirements that have to be met. And starting this year, dealers are supposed to provide you with a time of sale report documenting that your vehicle is qualified, whether you take the rebate or the tax credit. A great source for information is fueleconomy.gov, and I can share that link in the chat. Also, I often share a NerdWallet article that is regularly updated that goes over those specifications as well. So I can share that link in the chat as well.
Yeah, that would be really helpful because I think that people would love to know more about the incentives and how to access them. I've also shared a resource for Plug in America. They've got a great website that helps if you're looking for new vehicles accessing that tax credit, used vehicles accessing that tax credit, or if you're interested in leasing and using the commercial tax credit, lots of folks take that option as well. So yes, please share those resources. That would be great. All right. And I really appreciate you making some time and talking with us. I'm going to turn it over to Madelyn and Wesleigh, but I wanted to remind folks that are on the call that, or that are on the webinar rather, not the call, that if you have questions, to be putting them in the question and answer section, and then Sarah will pop back on and answer those questions as they come in at the end. All right, so switching over to Madelyn and Wesleigh. Madelyn Collins is the Electric Transportation Equity Manager at SACE, where she strives towards a just, clean transportation future through collaboration and community empowerment. Madelyn is an intersectional environmentalist, community organizer, and dance instructor who also helps lead our Electric Black Futures, which is a transformative project that empowers Black communities to shape their electric mobility future. And Wesleigh Wright is the community engagement liaison at East Tennessee Clean Fuels, working to equitably increase the use of cleaner fuels and vehicles to improve the health and economy of communities across Tennessee. She is passionate about the essentialism of equity in a green future and loves getting lost outside and dancing in the community. So thank you, Madelyn and Wesleigh, for joining the conversation today. So we are going to talk a little bit about your adventure on an EV road trip. And, you know, we all have heard the cliche, it's not the destination, but the journey. But your story does have an important destination. So Madelyn, maybe you can kind of start us there.
Yeah, it's really great to speak today. And thank you for inviting me and Wesleigh on the panel. Our destination, so we started in Knoxville and went to Atlanta. We're actually going to Harambe House's Southeast Environmental Justice Summit, where they invite a lot of important environmental justice leaders into Atlanta to make plans and discuss and take actionable changes and strategies to really transforming environmental justice issues that are happening in the Southeast. And I was able to invite Wesleigh on down from East Tennessee Clean Fuels, where I used to work at in Clean Cities World, and we were able to take this journey together. There was a lot of different highs and lows throughout the journey. It was really interesting. But yeah, I want to first start off with Wesleigh. I don't want to steal your thunder, Wesleigh, but it was actually Wesleigh's first time in an electric vehicle ever. So I was able to give her that experience of being in the passenger seat. So I'll hand it over to Wesleigh.
Yeah, like Maddie said, it was my first time ever in an EV. And I kind of have a unique perspective on electrifying my ride because I don't personally own a car. I never have. I typically walk and bike everywhere that I go. And so when it comes to longer distance trips, which I'm very familiar with, I heavily rely on carpooling. I am the designated passenger princess in a lot of these circumstances, but that also means that I'm providing a lot of assistance through like navigation, you know, notifying the driver of when it's important to stop and maybe take a break, walk around, use the bathroom, get food, what have you. That was a very different experience in an EV because we took the Tesla Model X, I believe, which Maddie has a great video, if you guys haven't seen the series yet, of my reaction to seeing the doors go up in like the butterfly position for the first time. And I was just standing on the side of the road waiting to be picked up. But it also has a really cool navigation system that was very, very helpful, not only in directing us to where we needed to go, but also in showing us where charging stations would be along the way. stopping to charge was like a unique part of this experience that is very different than stopping to fuel up and get gas. It took a little bit longer, but that kind of helped to, I guess, combine those typical additional stops that you would make. So while the vehicle was charging, we were able to like stop and walk around and get food and stop and, just hang out, stretch our legs. It kind of took, I feel like, a lot of the historic tension in a road trip that I felt, where like there's so much urgency created because we had to plan so intentionally. I think that the journey was a lot more enjoyable through that experience. And so that was very, very unique. Um, Other than that, I think I would say like, yeah, I do have a lot of road trip experience. I come from a very large family that is based in California, and we've driven back and forth between Tennessee and California no less than 9 times, largely because it's a lot more economic for us than paying for all of those flights at one time. And so, as much as I was enjoying the road trip, the lens through which I do my work is through the lens of marginalized, underserved communities, and what kind of clean transportation solutions are accessible to them. And a lot of them can't afford like that initial cost barrier of getting into an EV yet. So while I found like this was a very enjoyable solution, I also know that road tripping is a very practical choice for other folks in my position to take. And it really inspired me to work harder at trying to bridge that gap between like, how do we get that initial cost barrier of even a used EV, like handled for these people so that way they can attend important events like the Southeast Environmental Justice Summit. And yeah, just speaking to that point of different communities and different experiences, I guess I can hand it back to you, Maddie, and you can kind of go further into that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Wesleigh. And yeah, it was awesome to have the passenger princess helping me with some things. So I also had this was actually my first time driving outside of Tennessee and long distance ever. So I was navigating between two different things of like, okay, I'm doing a long distance trip. Also, I have to ride someone. Also, it's in an EV. So there was a lot of things going into it that I was like, I need to figure out these anxieties. And so one thing I mentioned in the blog that we had written about was that planning is an essential part of traveling in general, but especially with electric vehicles. One of the part in my blog, the way the interface is in the Tesla, it's all this like iPad. And I personally don't feel comfortable trying to touch this iPad as I'm like driving, and like it was during the summer last year, so it was hot. So like I had to make sure like the air conditioning was great. I had to do all of these kind of prep work, as well as figure out what is like my charging route. And so I did want to, like Wesleigh talk about this through the lens of how I experience traveling and road trip. So although this is my first time driving myself long distance and road tripping, I have done it with my family a lot, of course, as well. And historically, my family feels very uncomfortable road tripping around the Southeast, historically, because it's not safe. As a Black person in America, there is things that were historically called sundown towns. And although a lot of them don't exist anymore, there is still a lot of different areas that are unsafe. Literally 4 years ago in 2020, Amada Berry, who was 25, I was 26 last year during this, he got shot and killed just running down the street. So that's a lived reality that we have to live in. Me and Wesleigh were having interesting conversations driving down the road of like, not only was there range anxiety of can we make it to our destination, there was also anxiety of we're two Black women in a Tesla that had giant decals in it. And also we're moving in spaces that are rural that we don't maybe want to like stop or get near or lose charge in a place where there's like lots of flags that don't like us. So that was an interesting layer as we were driving through. I actually put a map out to the left side here. So on the right side, there's this awesome database that DOE has that maps out alternative fuel stations. And you can actually pick them whether you want to look at electric stations, biofuels, different things. I put them down to electric, and it kind of shows on the right-hand side from Knoxville to our destination down, which is Atlanta. Those are different electric chargers. On the left side, you'll see a map that has historic sundown towns or area that has been reported recently as cases of hate crimes against Black people. And that's also listed down there. So I wanted to share this as it is a very lived reality, especially when talking about charging and future charging placements, to not only think about, you know, accessibility and like road stops and all of that, but also thinking about safety of how different people are traveling through. And I will definitely say that was a big thing going through as we were going to our destination in Atlanta. But as we were talking and going through, we did not lose charge. We got there safely. You know, we got a little bit of weird looks. Like I said, 2 Black women in a Tesla driving, you know, some people were like, but we did get there safely, and we were able to go to the Harambe Houses Southeast Environmental Justice Summit, where a lot of these things that I talked about earlier was able to be even more fleshed out with people there. And I was really thankful to have this experience of experiencing a futuristic technology while also talking about and understanding how history is still happening now and acknowledging how that's showing out in the present in this road trip. So it was very, very interesting. And I think I'm really glad that through this clean energy generation webinar, we had made inclusive spaces by inviting me and Wesleigh. But I think it also is important in these times to really go down deep into environmental justice and talk about issues like this. Because for me and my friends and family, I would love to feel that when I'm in a EV and I'm looking for charging, I don't have to be scared of where I'm going to charge, whether as a Black person or a woman. I would like that safety. So yeah, thank you again for letting us speak. And I'm really excited to see where transformations go in the future of transforming e-mobility that is clean as well as safe and just. So that's all I had. Feel free to ask questions. I have some sources I can put down in the chat as well that kind of talks about some of the things I laid out. But yeah, I will hand it over to the next person. I don't remember who that is exactly, but thank you.
Thank you, Madelyn and Wesleigh, for sharing your story and pointing out the very real realities of being a Black woman in the Southeast traveling, and then, you know, putting that all together for us and helping us to better understand your road trip. So appreciate that. All right. So, and we will, again, I just wanted to remind everybody, we'll get to questions at the end. So if you do have some questions, please put them in the Q&A and then we can ask them at the end. So our next speaker is Tarique Miller, who is an associate director at EVNoire, working to accelerate an equitable, cleaner, and greener e-mobility future for all. His life experiences include earning a bachelor's degree in information computer systems from the University of Maryland Global College and a master business administration from Webster University. He is retired from the United States Army as a Chief Warrant Officer 4 after 22 years as a network management technician. And he has been an EV owner since 2018, from a Tesla Model 3 to a Tesla Model Y, to his current Rivian R1T and his wife's refreshed Tesla Model X, and is excited to speak on his experience. So welcome, Tarique. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Dory. Really appreciate it. Very excited about having this conversation and look forward to the discussion.
Awesome, awesome. So you have owned, like I just said, 4 different EVs since you first made the switch from gas to electric in 2018. So what was your initial motivation to go EV? And then what have you learned from owning different models? So like a Tesla versus a non-Tesla, especially when it comes to charging, or are there other differences that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, sure. So, again, thank you for having me on the panel. But from my experience in the military, I have a really big technical and technology background. So one of the biggest things that drew my attention was the technology aspect that are in these vehicles. My first time sitting in, actually my first EV that I sat in was a Model X and a Model S. And just seeing the screen, seeing all the different things that you can do in regard to the navigation system, it just blew my mind. So the technology aspect was something that I really enjoyed interacting with. So that was one of the reasons. Another reason is the convenience factor. Just owning an EV and being able to, and for all the people that are joining, being able to wake up and never having to go to a gas station. Always waking up with a full state of charge or a full tank of gas, right? And never being late for a meeting, knowing that you can just go and get to where you need to go. So the convenience factor was also something that was a great contributing factor. Obviously, the decreased carbon emissions. Um, one story that I can add is about 3 years ago, we had this thing in Texas called snowvid, right? When we had that snowstorm come through, and a lot of us lost power. So we lost power for about a week, and we were able to, with our vehicle at the time, I had the Model Y. The house was freezing cold, so we used it as like a warming tent where the kids could go sit in the car in the garage with the doors closed and have the car nice and warm. We also used it at the time to run a power cord into the house where we kept all the devices charged. We had it plugged into a light bulb, so we were able to have light. So, just being able to use the vehicle for those type of situations was amazing. And as we mentioned earlier with the first panelist, a lot of the vehicles now are coming with the capability where the vehicle can actually power your home. So if you have the correct setup, you can plug your vehicle into your home, and when you lose power, the vehicle that can actually power your home. So moving on to, just the car is a newer car today than when I first bought it, right? So I have the Rivian R1T. I've had that going on a year now. My wife has a Model X. We've had that for about 2 years now. And the technology that's in the car, because these cars are software based, all it takes is an over-the-air update to give you new features. So, for example, and a lot of them are creature comforts, right? So, one of the features that are in a lot of the cars now is when you turn on the indicator, the camera on the right side or left side of the vehicle will, on the display, show you what's happening on that side of the car. So instead of looking over your shoulder or being concerned, that's just another option for you to look at and see what's going on in the lane to your left or to your right. So, those are just things that didn't come with the car when I purchased it, but because of a software update, now it has the capability. So a lot of the cars, because of software update, are have more features or feel newer now than when you purchase it. And then just the car being fun to drive. These cars have electric motors. Some cars have one motor, some cars have dual motors, some cars have quad motor where there's a motor on each tire. And obviously, that will increase the performance of the vehicle. And because they're electric motors, it has instant torque. So as soon as you hit that accelerator, the gap that you would normally feel in an internal combustion engine vehicle or a gas vehicle, where you hit the accelerator and it takes like a second before it actually kicks in electric vehicles, that's gone. As soon as you touch that accelerator, you're gone. So you can get out in front on the expressway with no issues at all. So very fun to drive. Technology is big, and the usability and accessibility is just awesome. Now, when we go to talking about the differences of the vehicles, a lot of vehicles have a lot of the same capabilities. Like, for example, there's a capability called regenerative braking. So what that is because it's an electric vehicle, when you can conduct one pedal driving. So you're driving with the accelerator, and as soon as you take your foot off the accelerator, the motors will power down and perform a braking function. So the car is braking, and while it's braking, it's putting energy back into the battery. So you could potentially drive the vehicle without never touching the brake if you can time it properly, because it comes to a complete stop. So that is consistent across most electric vehicles. There are other things that some electric vehicles have that others don't, but there's 40 plus, 50 plus electric vehicles on the market within the United States, much more outside of the country. So there's something for everyone. Full self-driving, in the Tesla is amazing. I've had a chance to demo that, where I can just sit in the vehicle. Obviously, you want to always remain attentive of what's going on around you, but the vehicle literally will take you from point A to point Z without little to no intervention. So the technology is obviously getting much better, but it's just amazing feat to see. And then I think the last point I'll make on this question is when you're talking about some of the differences, again, with the vehicles, is that some of the vehicles come with a CCS port for charging, which is the combined charging system. And then some of the vehicles come with NAC ports, which NAC is more germane to Tesla. That's the Tesla port. But in the future, most of the vehicles are adopting the NAC port configuration so that we have one standard. So that's just a consideration to think about when you're purchasing a vehicle and in regard to charging.
Thank you. You unpacked so many topics just then. So I appreciate all of those insights. But I wanted to hone in a little bit more on charging since you started to talk about the two different ports. If somebody who's not driven electric before and they're kind of just starting to understand charging, can you kind of walk us through what everybody should know about the different charging levels and how those work in terms of like what are the best applications for the different types of charging?
Yeah, sure, definitely. You know, in my opinion, one of the largest considerations when purchasing an electric vehicle is how you're going to power it, right? How are you going to charge it? So, you know, and there's different options when it comes to charging. Starting at the basics, there's 3 charging levels, right? There's level 1, which is any plug electrical port in your home, the 110 outlet in your home can charge your electric vehicle. That being said, that's the slowest way to charge your electric vehicle. Another term for using the 110 outlet is called trickle charging. You'll get between 2 or 3 miles per hour. So again, when you're in a pinch and you have nothing else, that will work. Then there's level 2 charging, which also can be in the home, which is a 220-volt outlet, similar to what your dryer runs off of. A lot of the homes now either have them in the garage, or you can what most people do is update their garage where they'll add those 220 outlets in their garage, and they'll just use the mobile connector that comes with a lot of the vehicles or that you can purchase with the vehicle to charge your vehicle when you park in the garage. And that can give you, depending on the voltage, can give you upwards between 30 and 45 miles per hour, right? So that's usually sufficient for most people. So that's level 2 within the home. There's also level 2 on the streets, right? There's level 2 in garages, a lot of the charge point or Electrify America. There's all different kind of brands that are out there that have level 2 charging in cities, at libraries, at different places. So you can utilize those also. Here in San Antonio, actually, ChargePoint is free for all that are in the city. So, it just depends on where you're located, but usually those level 2 chargers are for cost. And then there's level 3, or known as DC fast charging. Those are, the most widely known DC fast charging is the Tesla supercharging network. Rivian also has their own proprietary DC fast charging network. And then all the other third-party networks also have DC fast charging. And keeping in mind that even though there's a little bit more planning that goes into driving an electric vehicle, the car does a lot of the work for you. So if I'm here in Texas and I've driven an electric vehicle from Texas to California or Florida, you just punch in your destination and the car will recommend those DC fast charging stops along your route. So that's just a little bit about the charging levels. The last thing I'll say about charging is lifestyle is definitely important and definitely key, depending on what charging type you want to use. If you have a vehicle and you're only driving 30 miles a day, in a lot of cases, some people can get by with using a 110 outlet. I still recommend definitely, trying to get that level 2 plug in your garage. It just makes things a little bit more accessible and easier. But looking at, you know, you know, how you operate on a daily basis, your current lifestyle definitely should be taken into account when you're thinking about charging your vehicle.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lifestyle and choices. It's nice to know that there are options, but to understand all of the options is really important. So, all right. So the last thing I wanted to touch base with you on is that I frequently have heard, driving an electric vehicle is the same as driving a gas, because in terms of emissions benefits, because the electricity used to charge an EV frequently in the Southeast comes from burning fossil fuels. So can you talk a little bit about why that is not a correct assumption?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, at EVNoire, you know, we're a consulting firm of subject matter experts who pride ourselves in solving sustainability and electrification complex problems. So one of those major problems is the lack of accurate information that's out there. So, one of our tenets is to educate the public on sustainability and electrification, in matters of, also meeting people where they are. So what I could say is that over the lifetime of an EV, and which is usually hundreds of thousands of miles in a lot of cases, the total greenhouse gas emissions associated with manufacturing, charging, and driving an EV can typically be lower than the total greenhouse gases of a gasoline vehicle. So, because EVs have zero tailpipe emissions and are typically responsible for significant lower greenhouse gases during the operation. Additionally, I would say that the amount of carbon pollution created depends on how electricity is generated, right? So for example, coal and natural gas power plants, they emit carbon pollution, while renewable resources like wind and solar do not. So, as companies continue to transition away from coal and gas, the benefits of EVs will increase substantially.
Very good. Thank you. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that have come in as we have been talking, and see if we can get some of those answered. So the first question for Sarah Madelyn is: switching from a gas to an electric car difficult from a perspective of driving?
I would say no. It's very similar. You have a pedal for acceleration, a pedal for braking, or you can use the regenerative braking, just taking your foot off, and it slows automatically, which is really nice. It wasn't just difficult, and skipping the gas stations is just a thrill that you're not having to pull into gas stations, fill up and smell all the fumes. Like Tarique said, just charging at home overnight, going out in the morning and your car is ready. It makes life easier, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, I think some people think that there's all these buttons and things to learn and it's going to be scary, but if once you get in and you settle in, you realize there's a steering wheel, there's the pedals. It's very much like driving an electric car, but better because of all of the things that have been mentioned earlier, the torque and the ease of charging and the like. All right, so this question is about fast charging, and Tarique, maybe you can answer this. So the question is, on average, how long does it take to fast charge while you're traveling?
Great question. Great question. So it depends, right? So there's different levels of fast charging. One of the nuances that go into charging your vehicle is realizing that when you pull up to a fast charging hub or a fast charging station, to know what you're getting. So if you're using the Tesla superchargers, there are different rates of charge. There's a 150 kilowatt charger versus 350 kilowatt charger. And that's the same for the third party charging networks also. So in a perfect world, let's say you had a vehicle that could take 300 kilowatts and you're pulling up to a 300 kilowatt charger. depending on your state of charge will depend on how fast your vehicle will ramp up and charge. What in the best case scenario, when you're driving on a long trip, it's better to stop and charge at a lower state of charge. Because when you start charging at a lower state of charge, it ramps up quicker and it will get you to a higher state of charge. What a lot of people don't do is when you're driving and you just see a charging station and you're at 80%, it makes no sense to really stop and charge unless you really have to for other reasons. But to get to the true answer of your question, to get from 10 or 20% to 80% in a lot of cases on a perfect situation, it could take 20 to 30 minutes. It just depends on the vehicle and it depends on the speed of charging. Now, what I do when I'm traveling is I plan my rest stops and my potty breaks around the charging station, right? So, if you're driving 12 hours to stay this way, when you stop, you just plan that stop so that when you stop, you go, use the bathroom, grab something to eat and come back. And by the time you come back, in most cases, you're ready to go. But if you're not, again, back to the technology. Most of these cars, you get in, you can stream Hulu, Netflix, you can sit down and watch all these shows. And then by the time you do that, you're ready to go. So, those are some of the nuances that go into charging, fast charging.
That's really helpful to consider. Thank you. All right. Another question is about servicing an electric vehicle. So the question is, how difficult is it to find service for an EV? And are services for items like brakes the same as with gas vehicles? So maybe, Sara, you can start. I don't know if you've had to have your vehicles serviced.
Yeah, I've been driving EVs now for 5 years, and I've never had to have one serviced. So I drove the e-Golf for 2 years, and now I've been driving the ID4 for 3 years. I have with the ID4, since it had just come out, there were some recalls that I had to take it in for, and it was nothing that I had noticed, but just the manufacturer knew that there was things that need to be updated, and that went really smoothly. So yeah, I can't speak to repairs and service.
That's probably a good problem to have then, Sara. Tarique, I noticed that you put your hand up. So if you wouldn't mind weighing in, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Definitely one of the biggest perks of purchasing an electric vehicle is the limited maintenance, low maintenance costs, right? When you're talking specifically about brakes, again, with regenerative braking, the motor's braking the vehicle, you don't really use your brakes as often. So brakes last forever. One of the things that you do have to focus on with electric vehicles because of the weight of the vehicle, sometimes tires do wear a little faster, and because of the torque, we have a little heavy foot, right? So we want to test out the performance. So you got to definitely keep an eye on your brakes. Your tires. But again, there's a lot less moving parts in an electric vehicle versus an internal combustion vehicle. So there's a lot less things to break. And when things do sometimes go wrong because with any technology, any vehicle, things happen. A lot of the recalls, a lot of the things to fix can happen over the air. So when you see things in the news saying, oh my God, Tesla has 100,000 recalls, or Rivian has 100,000, or whatever company has 100,000 recalls, you got to put it into perspective. These recalls can be fixed and you don't even know it. It happens with a software push. So those are some things to consider when it comes to the maintenance of a vehicle, an electric vehicle.
Great. And I myself have been an EV driver since 2017. And I will say that the only maintenance that I've had to do are tire changes. And with the Tesla, they do have a little puck. It looks like a hockey puck that they have to put on the car lift. And some tire change places, you have to bring your own puck. So that might be something to ask before you bring it in for a tire change.
Hey, Dory.
Yeah.
One other thought. Another thing that is amazing when it comes to a lot of the companies that are making electric vehicles again, I've owned Teslas and I've owned a Rivian, is that a lot of the service, they have mobile teams. And what these mobile teams will do when you put in a service request, depending on the situation, the mobile team will come out to wherever you are. It doesn't have to be at your house, whatever address you put, they'll come out and they can fix that issue or rectify the problem at your home.
Thank you. And then a little follow on to that. How often do you need to get your EV checked? Like, are there certain miles that you need to go in or anything that folks should think about?
Yeah, so it varies depending on vehicle and maker, but similar to what Sarah said, for the most part, you just drive it, charge it, and go, because you know it's very few and far between where you have to get any kind of maintenance done.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, just as a new car with the ID4, there are checks that they want you to come in and have it checked, but really they're filling, you know, windshield wiper fluid and just checking things. And I haven't had any issues with that.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in is asking about the growing used EV market. So can anybody speak to the used EV market and its role in affordability?
Yeah, my sister just bought a used EV, one of the Volvos, and it's great. A used EV right now is one of the best deals going, especially the low mile used EVs, because you still have, you know, all of the warranties and service that you would have with a new EV, and you know, but probably paying a lower price. So there are a lot of really good deals on used EVs. And if I had to do it over, I had to purchase at this time, you know, I'd probably go for a used EV, and my husband would go for a used Ford Lightning.
Thank you, Sarah. And I can just speak to my own personal experience. We recently purchased a used Chevy Bolt for $14,000, and then we're able to take the used tax credit. So there was an additional $4,000 off. And with the way that that works is the dealer, we transferred the credit to the dealer. So they were able to basically just reduce the price of the vehicle to us. So we wrote them a check for about $10,000 for a used Bolt that was a 2017, but the battery had been on recall. They just replaced the battery in February of this year. So now the battery is warranted for the 8 years or 100,000 miles again. So it's basically like in terms of the functionality of the car, brand new. So there are definitely great deals to be had. Definitely worth taking a look and making sure that the battery health is where it needs to be. And there are apps to help you with that as well. So we are at 12:28. I don't think we have time to sneak in one more question. So I will just pause here and say that if we did not get to your question, we did take them all down, and we'll be putting together some resources to try to answer those, in addition to compiling all of the resources that were mentioned on the webinar today. And we'll be putting that together in an email for y'all, as well as the recording of the webinar. And it will be posted on SACE's website as well. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists for sharing their time and their insights with us today. I'd also like to thank everyone for attending today. We hope that you found the information interesting and informative. Like I mentioned, please be on the lookout for that email from us with links to the resources that were discussed. And if you do have further questions as you think about them, please feel free to reach out to our team after the presentation. We'll provide contact information in that follow-up email. So thanks everybody again for attending. We appreciate you, and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.